Rachel. How are you doing?
Good, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for speaking to me.
Of course.
How are you doing? Are you recovering from the, because I know you've been to StokerCon and all over the place just recently, no?
Yes, so StokerCon, ThrillerCon back to back, and
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I'm I need a while to hibernate.
Okay, I saw you didn't stop, especially at StokerCon. I mean, there's quite a few people I follow on Instagram that have been there, and I saw you karaoke queen, etc., etc. Yeah, yeah, all
I
kinds of
yeah,
stuff. Yeah, yeah.
I was the first to karaoke, so I feel like if
I the
you're the
first one.
first to go, you have to set the tone, or else nobody else like knows how to
You
show
set the
up.
bar
So
pretty high up. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Brilliant. Something else that you set the bar really high is with Play Nice. Congratulations. It's so
Oh,
good. Loved it so much.
thank you so much. I'm so glad.
Uh-huh. But so I mean, the first thing I want to talk about is each time you come up with a new book, it's kind of it specifically dives into a specific genre. No, I mean you've been for kind of the vampires, werewolves, these kind of things, and this one specifically goes for a specific trope of the haunted house. No, so I'm quite curious when you decide to write a book, do you kind of go specifically for the tropes and the kind of the specific genre, and then think how you could kind of flip those specific tropes, does the story come first and then you decide which kind of genre you want to set it in?
They have to come at the same time. Like it has
Right.
to like it's like a lightning strike. I wish because sometimes I have like a really cool idea for like a trope, but I don't have the heart of the story. I don't
Right.
have like this substance of it. Or sometimes I'll think about like the substance or some issue that I'm curious about, or some life problem I would like to work out through my books, and I can't think of an interesting trope to use as an avenue for that story. So with each of my books, it needs to come together at the same time in a way that feels special. So for Play Nice, it was a bit trickier because I like knew the book was under contract, so I promised a book. I just didn't know what it was going to be about, and then I had to figure it out. And I was thinking about what I find most interesting about a haunted house story. And I was thinking a lot about Amityville. Um, and I think it's the layers of what if you were a kid who grew up in a haunted house. And I think we all have haunted childhoods in a way. And like there's no truth in memory, really. There's only our truth in it.
Yeah.
And the interesting layers about that and how I could use that um, in a haunted house story. So that's how it kind of all gelled together. And it was sometimes it's clean, like with Such Sharp Teeth, which was my werewolf novel. I was like werewolves and what it is to exist in a body, and like from there. And with Play Nice, it was a bit murkier to work through, but I knew I wanted to do something with haunted house and childhood and memory.
Yeah, no, I mean the memory definitely plays a big part, which I want to ask you a little about a bit about later on. But I mean, can we talk a little bit about, without giving too much away, obviously, about the kind of the protagonist Cleo, who's kind of we can say she's a fashion influencer now,
Yeah.
which
Hmm.
really kind of plays into a lot of the themes in the book. So I'm quite curious why you decided, because a lot of people, especially when it's in the horror genre, they don't particularly like to make films or write books that have a lot of tech and kind of there are things with influencers, but they try and kind of keep away, eschew any kind of mobile phones or any kind of talk of social media, those kind of things. But you kind of really lean into it. So I'm quite curious why you decided that Clio would be a really kind of a great kind of way into a haunted house novel.
So when I started thinking about memory and childhood and what it would be like particularly again, I mentioned Amityville, like what's life like for those kids? Like you grew up in a house that's infamously haunted. Are you constantly asked about it? What do you remember about that time? So I was thinking a lot about who's the right person to tell this story. So I had the pieces in place, the haunted house, the kind of perception memory. Um, and then I was like, who would come out, like who would have that childhood, like how would they be affected by how they grew up. And I thought it would be very interesting to have somebody who was not in control of their narrative as a kid to be very in control of their narrative as an adult, and who is more in control of their narrative than an influencer.
Mhm.
And that's really interesting to me because to have a character who grew up in a place that was volatile and they don't have control and they like their parents are kind of in a their Cleo's parents went through a really nasty divorce. And how did that affect her? Well, I think she would be thinking a lot about image and how can she protect her image. And nobody does that better than influencers. And you can control how you dress, how you present yourself. And so it made sense to me to have a character who grew up in this environment be a stylist and a fashion influencer because that is something she can have complete control over. And that is a way for her to be confident and move through life. Um, kind of that was her coping mechanism. So I think it's also fun and like cheeky. And I think um, people assume that influencers are very surface level, but I think
Yeah.
why does somebody decide to pursue that? And I think that instance of control is tricky and interesting.
Yeah, I mean, you don't shy away from the fact that she is kind of, there is certain things about her persona that's quite fickle, and so, I mean, she talks about when she meets certain people, the kind of the clothes that they wear.
Yeah.
So, oh, he saved himself because he's wearing some Vans or
Yeah.
things like that, you know. So you don't shy away from that. So how did you kind of balance making showing kind of the fickle side of this person, but also showing someone who wants to kind of take control of her life at the same time?
I think with Clio, it's it's close first person, so we're inside her head. So all of her thoughts are not necessarily going to be clean or easy or perfect or nice. And um, I think I wanted to have a character who kind of at every was challenging at every turn, dare the reader to judge her for being like authentically herself.
Yeah.
Um, because she's a lot of the things that women aren't supposed to be. She's bratty, she's mean, she's self-involved, she's promiscuous, like all of these things that I think kind of invite judgment. I wanted her to feel very comfortable in her own skin because she's the youngest child. She is the favorite. She's the baby of the family. She's gotten everything she wanted her whole life. Um, so I wanted her to behave in a way that is realistic for somebody who grew up in those circumstances. And, um, but I think showing her vulnerable side, I wanted it to kind of come to build and to kind of build up this, like, yes, she is all of those things, but like underneath it all, I think all of us have vulnerabilities and we're sensitive and like none of us are above feeling sad or needing help. And so I wanted to sort of start her up here in a way that's kind of brash and like um mean and judgmental and like not in a like a very malicious way, but more in like a tricky, um mischievous way and kind of get the reader to feel a certain way about her. And then when she, throughout the novel, she starts to like break down and kind of examine why she is the way she is and why she makes the decisions she makes and all of these things to kind of see how the reader would feel and empathize with her considering where she started.
Hmm. And then in terms of kind of writing through the lens of someone who's so image conscious, did that kind of, did you come across any stumbling blocks kind of when you wanted to go into the kind of the terror side of the story?
Um, I think it was really fun because when you
Mhm.
start somebody off so clean and polished, then you can really like mess them up. Like if you have somebody who's so like, you know, this is how I present my life and my life is so beautiful and I have such a beautiful, perfect life. It's really fun to just go in and be like, not anymore, you don't. Like,
Yeah.
so I think it was more of a fun experience than a challenge in that sense. It was more about like how far do I go? And, for me, like I grow to love my protagonist. So it's hard to be like, yeah, I'm gonna like how low am I gonna take you before this book is over?
Yeah. I mean, coupled to that, you also you very much kind of highlight how it almost felt like that they really kind of was you had a chip on your shoulder against how the world um feeds on our suffering. Especially, I mean, it really kind of made me think it wasn't specifically about social media per se, but it just felt as though you were kind of fed up with the world being so kind of engrossed of seeing people suffer. So I'm quite curious where the kind of the genesis for that side of the story came from.
I think we're all attracted to suffering. I think it's a little other people's suffering because it feels like I think we all know that suffering is coming for us, like it's right at our heels. And so experiencing other people's suffering is almost like stretching before exercise. Like that's how I view it.
Mhm.
Um, but I think there's like a very fine line between that curiosity, that like healthy curiosity, and this like cruel satisfaction from watching other people suffer. And for me, I grew up, um, I was a girl in the 90s and the early aughts. So I grew up seeing women destroyed by tabloids, particularly, I think a lot about Britney Spears. Um,
Right.
and just how cruel the media was to somebody who was going through like a really horrific time in their life and had nobody in their life who had their best interest in mind. And people just loved it, foaming at the mouth to see the downfall of this like bright, talented young woman. And at the time that I was a young woman, and how deeply that affected me. And I think it did leave a chip on my shoulder. And
Hmm.
really throughout this book, I kind of had to, no pun intended, exercise that demon where I was just
Yeah.
like, I I feel a lot of bitterness towards that and towards like I was hyper conscious of my image growing up because I saw how quick you can lose it. One mistake and people just love to see love to see someone love to see a downfall. So that was definitely a big part of me writing this book.
Hmm. It's quite funny. I mean, because I was like, I saw you, like I said, I saw the photographs of you on and StokerCon and those kind of places. The community, especially the writers, you're just so good friends. Exactly the opposite of what we've just been talking about now.
Yeah. It's the horror community is very supportive.
Yeah.
Um, you
And the
think
thriller community. I think you said the thriller
yeah,
community as
the
well.
thriller
One of
community
your
as
recent
well.
posts as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
I was really surprised because I have a lot of friends in the horror community. That's kind of like I've never been to ThrillerCon before, and I was just like, or Thriller Fest before, and I was just like very like surprised and by their generosity. So the writer community is very supportive and lovely.
Mhm.
I I'm very lucky and very grateful for it, and I think readers too are just the bookish community in general is just lovely. I don't know if the same can be said for like
For other ones, yeah, but nice. I mean, just the first few reviews, the first few blurbs that I've seen are
yeah,
from other horror writers, and it's just
yeah,
all the horror writers. They always get so many people to read the books, and it's just everyone's kind of helping each other up to the top.
yeah.
Yeah, it's great. Uh-huh. So something I mean, coupled to what we just said there, also, I love the fact that the book also, I mean, it went in a very different way than I was expecting towards the end. I don't want to spoil anything, of course, but I loved the fact it was really it was not a happy ending in any way, but even though it wasn't a happy ending, it was so satisfactory because it kind of stands in the face of erasure, which I wasn't expecting at all. I really enjoyed that so much. Was that something that you was that kind of an ending that you already kind of had in mind, or was that something that came about as you were kind of creating the story?
I wish I was better at like outlining and plotting, but usually it's kind of a fly by the seat of my pants and feel it out. Um,
Right.
I think for all of my books, I think I've written enough now that like I have a readership and like if I were to like write something horrifically grim and hopeless, I would kind of betray my readership because that's not what they come to me for. All of my endings are not necessarily happy, but they're not like going to emotionally destroy you.
Yeah.
So it's a balance of finding out a way that's like, for me, it's more about where do I want to leave my protagonist? Just because I write like pretty much all my books are just character studies, like one character telling you this story, you're inside their head the whole time. if you're going to be on this journey with a character for 300 pages, like I want the reader to feel like I'm leaving the character in a good place or a place that makes sense for the rest of the story. So that's kind of how I felt with Cleo. I don't want to put a neat bow on anything. And I don't have the answers to all the questions that I raise in the book, but I want it to feel like this character has come to the end of their arc or their learning curve or whatever they're going through in the book. They've kind of come to a natural stopping point in that story. And, the reader can imagine them in the future without feeling um without like a big question mark hanging over their head.
Hmm. I imagine you get asked this a lot, and most writers probably the same. But how much of Cleo would you say comes from yourself? Because she obviously she feels like she has not been supported in the things that she wants to do, no? And I'm just curious how much. Don't share it. Don't. I mean, if you don't want to share too much, that's fine. But I'm just curious how much of that kind of comes from you. Maybe you find it difficult to find your path to become a writer at first, or was it exactly the opposite? And that's just something that you came up with for the Cleo character.
I think Cleo is probably the character who's like least like
At
I
least like.
there's always a little bit of me in all of my characters, but like um I'm not super similar to Cleo. I think she's like the most funhouse mirror version of me of all my characters. But um I think I've always felt supported, at least in terms of like for my family, I felt supported. But I think um again, just being very image conscious and constantly being aware of like how you present yourself in spaces. I think that weighs heavy. And so it wasn't about breaking into the industry or like becoming a writer. I think it's about like perception, how I'm perceived as a writer. And that was something, when my first few books came out, like that was something on my mind a lot. And, just that constant pressure of like, what if I like say this thing and somebody, thinks I'm not intelligent, or what if like all of these that kind of external pressure, um, you know, that was perception and how I'm perceived, that weighs heavily on my mind kind of at all times. And so
Yeah, even still now,
Cleo,
is that not something that simmers down over the time as you release more books and get more fans?
it gets a little bit better because like
Yeah.
I kind of realized I can't control it. Like I think like,
Not everyone's gonna like what you do,
yeah,
no
not
matter what
everyone's
you
gonna
write.
like,
Yeah.
and I'm not perfect. I'm gonna like, babble in interviews and like,
Yeah, no,
um,
I'm speaking to you from the other side of the world. So I mean, people have different ideas just because of the
yeah,
way that they've grown up. So it's impossible for you to cater
yeah.
to everybody now. Yeah.
So I think I've just been able to kind of let go of that, but definitely because it's just been on my mind since I was young. That was something that kind of I gave to Cleo and got off my chest.
Hmm. And I want to go back to Cleo, and but this time I want to talk about her relationship with the two sisters because that
Mhm.
kind of really is kind of the real crux of the story as well. Without giving too much away, can you kind of describe how you decided where you wanted these three sisters to be in their lives and how that played into the story without kind of giving any spoilers away, obviously?
So there's three sisters. The eldest is Lita, who I kind of gave a lot of eldest daughter traits to, in terms of like I think there's some standard um, eldest child traits that people kind of generally assume or put on it, the oldest sibling, which is like she feels a lot of responsibility. She's an overachiever. She is a little bit jaded, doesn't feel like as loved and appreciated as she maybe wants to be. And she's like a very rigid. And then the middle child, and I'm a middle child. So I think
Right.
Daphne, a little bit more similar to me, is kind of like the peacemaker, appeasing, like whatever you want, like fine, it's whatever. Kind of does her own thing, doesn't like drama. And then Cleo, as the youngest, is the baby and like favorite of the family. And
Hmm.
I think I was also very conscious of we can all grow up in the same house and feel like we and have radically different childhoods. So I wanted that to be a factor while also keeping in mind that Lita and Daphne grew up in this supposedly haunted house too, and how it would have affected them. And there's not enough space on the page for me to dive into like the last 20 years of their lives and everything that they've been through, but how that would have informed their personality. And for Lita just kind of being very like um, dismissive and rigid and like very type A personality is kind of her coping mechanism. And for Daphne, a little bit of escapism, like she just sort of um, tries to put it out of mind and not really think about it and go with the flow. And so it was thinking about their role in terms of birth order and their roles within the specific family and how the haunted house would form their personalities. And then the dynamic I wanted to feel very, I have two siblings as well, and my mom's one of seven and my dad's one of eight. So I've like seen a lot of sibling dynamics in my day and make that feel lived in and real because you're right, it is the crux of the story is the relationship between the sisters.
Yeah, it does feel really lived in and real. Something else that feels kind of really lived in and real, which either pulls me right in or throws me straight out if it doesn't feel real. It's kind of when things get paranormal or you bring in kind of this demonologist and these certain characters I don't want to talk too much about. I want to leave that to the readers. So I'm quite curious how you approached that to make sure that it didn't kind of overdo it and it felt authentic and grounded, whilst at the same time kind of supernatural.
That was tricky because I had to like so the book within a book is Cleo's mother, Alexandra's story of their supposedly true story of the time that they spent in the house that Cleo finds and is reading as an adult. And so it was like an Amityville style book. And so I had to decide like how campy do I want to make it? Because I don't know if you've
Right.
ever read the Amityville horror,
I
but
haven't.
that
No, I
book
haven't. No.
is bananas. Like every
Right.
chapter ends with an exclamation point. It's wild. Like it's just like it's so campy. And so I had to make a decision like, do I want this to feel crazy, unbelievable, campy, wacky, or do I want to ground it a little bit more? And I did end up grounding it more. It's still like, a little like the stuff that happens in the book within a book is a little bit questionable about whether it happened or not. But I wanted to ground it because I felt like if it was too ridiculous, it would kind of throw off the tone of the book. So I had to make like a very conscious choice. And I was always walking that line of like, yes, there's like priests coming in like they always do in every haunted
Mhm.
house movie and, getting freaked out and leaving and, paranormal experts like that trope
Yeah.
and play into that trope in a satisfying way, but not go too far into it that it felt completely unreal. Because the whole point of this book is, and the whole point of Cleo's journey is wondering, like, parsing out truth from fiction. And so I wanted that to still feel tricky when you were reading the book. And if it felt a little bit wackier, you could more easily dismiss it as like, well, Alexandra's clearly embellishing.
Yeah.
And so I had to walk that line. That was a little bit tricky. That was probably the most challenging part of writing this book.
No, yeah, I think you made I mean, it could have probably worked the other way as well, but I think
Yeah.
it worked perfectly because it just felt like because it was so kind of grounded, it felt almost like dirty or that I'm not supposed to read that
Yeah.
part of the book. And it's like, but
Yeah.
because it felt so dirty, I wanted to keep reading those bits. So it worked really, really well. Yeah.
Oh, I'm so
Yeah.
glad. Phew.
Can you tell us a little bit about the mother and obviously without giving too much away, the mother and why you decided that she would be separated from the father and end up befriending kind of the demonologist et al. And the rest of the crew.
Um, so for me, Alexandra was really the character who like she needs to be, I knew she needed to be compelling, and I knew I needed to give the reader enough reason to question her and also give enough, just like a little bit of space to to be like, what if she was telling the truth, to have empathy for her, because that's Cleo's battle. Um, and so I think, again, it was playing with that perception and that sort of like the Britney Spears of it all, which is like, well, if if even if she was drunk and on drugs, like, does that mean that she's not deserving of empathy? Like, even if she was like mentally unstable, does that not, does everything she say now we don't believe because she had an episode? Um, and so that was something I was really thinking about a lot with Alexandra. And um, I think having her separated from the father, who everybody trusts and is kind of the stable force in their lives, already puts Alexandra at a deficit of like, we're already kind of picking sides. And so at the beginning of the book, you get to meet the dad and, um, you know, get time with this character in the present. And we only get Alexandra in her own words in the past. And so I wanted to have that separation because it gives an opportunity, gives more of that opportunity to question. Um, and the whole, I think Cleo's journey is having to examine. And a lot of times, like, we don't really ever fully know our parents. We can't really ever fully know another person.
Yeah.
And if you have one of those childhoods that there's a lot of question marks, um, I wanted to kind of really dial that up and to have it be like, well, we can't ask her. We can only like read between the lines of her own words and figure out, is this, did she embellish for the book within a book? Is this the truth? Is this what she thought she had to say? Is this what she remembers and not really what happened? So the more I could kind of isolate her, the more I could dial up all of that like uncertainty around her.
Mhm. I loved kind of a through point or throughout the book is the fact that you always kind of refer to Alex, even though kind of we can't trust, we don't know whether to trust or not what we're reading that she's written in this book now. But at the same time, there's never any doubt, especially in Cleo's mind. Especially, I mean, you talk about where she used to play specific songs that were
Mhm.
with female singers because she wanted to teach her daughters that they could grow up just as just like any male
Mhm.
from vocalist or a member of the band that they could grow up to be like a rock star. No, so I'm quite curious. That must have been quite a complicated balance to kind of to show this through story that she's always there supporting and doing these things that really make sense to show your kids that you can be rock stars, that you can do this, you can do that. To balance that, to make it so that the reader doesn't can still maybe not trust this other book inside the book that we're reading, if you get what I mean.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think there's, again, I did this with Cleo and I wanted to do it with Alex, which is like, it's not always, I think a lot of times we search for people to either be good or bad, or parents to either be a good parent or a bad parent. It's very easy to put people in those categories. And I think it makes us feel better to kind of it's more peaceful in our mind if we can put something in a bucket, put something in a drawer and close it. And people aren't good. Most people aren't good or bad, and most parents aren't good or bad. They're somewhere in the vast space between those two things.
Hmm.
And I wanted to show that with Cleo, that she's not a bad person. She might not be the ideal of what somebody would think is a good person. Um, and with Alex, like, she was not, just because she wasn't a good mother in many ways and she wasn't there for them a lot of their lives, and because she struggled with substance abuse, doesn't mean that she didn't try, or that she was irredeemable, or that she was unworthy of empathy. And so it was important for me to have Alex kind of advocate for herself a little bit on the page and like her notes in the margins, and to say, and within the book, to say like, you know, I did these things, I did care, but just because somebody cares and tries doesn't mean it's always necessarily enough. So I just like it's very important for me to show the humanity in every character. And I especially Alex, because she doesn't really, she's not in the present timeline. So she's only exists in the past and can only say so much to defend herself against the allegations that are taking place in the present. So it was important for me to include those little notes to show like, she thought she was doing the right thing at the time. And um, sometimes sometimes the effort is enough and sometimes it isn't. And that's up to Clio and her sisters to kind of parse through. Um, and the reader can make their own judgments. But
Hmm.
I, as the author, try not to pass judgment on my characters and just kind of decide who they are and let them be.
Hmm. Something that there's a real battle with the word selfishness in this book,
Mm.
because on the one side you talk about everything that exists in need in want. We operate with our own motives, and some more selfish than others. But at the same time, you also there's a lot of kind of you address how we also need to be selfish to stand up for ourselves, like we've been talking before. So I'm quite curious how you balance that, because that's something as well. Like people can judge you for saying you mustn't be selfish, but at the same time, we have to be selfish to kind of stand up and get where we want to get to, and which is specifically why I really enjoyed the ending of this book, because it kind of it's almost motivational in a way. It felt almost like a motivational
Yeah.
these books that kind of tell you you've got to stand up for yourself, but in a really good way. I really enjoyed that.
I think I think like thinking selfish kind of has a constant negative connotation. And I don't think it's always, and I think a lot of times people weaponize the word selfish to get something they want from us.
Yeah. Mhm.
And so I want to challenge people to think about the context that they're being called selfish in
Right.
and the context that they're calling themselves selfish in. Um, I I think like just how I have like a complicated, like I think the demon's complicated. I think Alex is complicated. This house is haunted by a demon instead of a ghost because I wanted something a little bit more like at one point I considered a poltergeist, but I kind of liked the more like the idea of a demon possessing a house versus a person. Um,
Mhm.
I wanted something with a little bit, I feel like ghosts are more brooding and they're just like, we're gonna like ooh in the night. And I like the idea of something a
Yeah.
little bit trickier
Something.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
um and I think like I wanted to draw a lot of parallels between the demon and Cleo and like for the purposes of like we all have our demons and we all have to like exist with those demons and learn to live in tandem. And I think um selfishness, if we let our selfishness like run rampant, then it's an issue. But if we
Mhm.
learn how to, if we don't, or if we don't do any, if we're just completely selfless because we're so terrified of being selfish, that's not good either. Um,
Mhm.
but I think it's a word that's often weaponized. So for me, I like wanted to kind of raise that question of of selfishness and be like, is it again like it's the nothing's always good, nothing is purely good, nothing's purely bad. I think a lot
Yeah.
of it exists in between, and I think selfishness is there too. And um, I like I think throughout the course of the book, I was thinking a lot about it and wanting to challenge the reader to change their perception of selfish.
Mhm. That's why I really appreciate it. I really love the way that Cleo she speaks what she thinks, especially to her sisters, and certain things that you think probably she probably says them. She kind of goes too far at certain points, but at the same time, eventually, that ultimately, we obviously don't want to spoil it, but ultimately they serve the purpose and kind of create a better
Yeah,
relationship. I don't want to give anything away. It's difficult, but yeah, they create a better relationship with the sisters and with the rest of the family. Ultimately, no.
yeah. I mean, you kind of have to. That's something that I it's fun to have a character who just says what they feel and says what they think.
Uh-huh.
Um, because it like she to the extreme where it's like it's up regardless of how people are going to react, she's going to say the thing, and then I get to write the fun, crazy reactions to it.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think ultimately you have if you suppress things, um, they're going to come out in uglier ways
You're
than
going to
if you just
explode
say the
later on, yeah.
yeah bad thing or whatever.
Exactly. Listen, before I let you go, I can't not talk about the actual house itself. I mean, obviously, um, renovation programs are all the rage at the moment about the zeitgeist. But how? I mean, how did you kind of go about specifically designing the house and deciding how you wanted Clio to renovate it, just to kind of to help it kind of blend into this demon story that you wanted to tell and the story of the family?
So I think um, when I think of like demon possession, like I think of Amityville, the 70s movie. I think about Poltergeist. I think about like a 70s shag carpet, like split level house. Like I just first I wanted that to be the atmosphere. I wanted it to feel kind of um like a 70s horror piece, like with the throwback of like having the demonologist and like all of these things. I liked those elements from 70s horror films. So I wanted the house to be from the 70s. And then I wanted it to feel a little and ordinary. Like I think a lot of hauntings take place in like remote grand Victorian houses, and I wanted it to be like at the end of a cul-de-sac and like feel kind of ordinary and like the split level of it all. And then I ended up looking just through Zillow, through like Googling 70 split levels. And so I found a lot of pictures of houses and I like found a lot of pictures of houses that had like sharp angles. And I
Right.
really liked that idea for a haunted house where it's like every it's like harsh. It's like a red house. It's got like a steeply pitched roof and not like what you would think of like homey and cozy, um, but instead kind of grimy and separated and the upstairs and downstairs and harsh angles and then of course the sliding doors because I think double sliding doors are the scariest thing. Just like out to the woods. I had
But
them in
did
my
you
house
actually
growing
build?
up.
Did you? Sorry to interrupt you, but did you kind of draw or create kind of the
In
architect?
my head, yeah, I see it
But I
vividly.
mean,
Like
you actually kind of created the drawings on a piece of paper because you really do take us on a grand tour, especially when she first goes to the place after
it's
not being
all in
there for
here.
years. But you
I
take us
didn't
on the
draw it
grand
on
tour.
paper. It's just in my
You
head.
really kind
Yeah.
of take us into the house, yeah.
Yeah.
But that's something that you don't actually kind of physically do it. You create it all
Mm-mm.
in your head. It's not actually based on a house that you found on Google or something that you've.
I have some pictures, but like
Uh,
the like how I see the pictures and they inspire the design that like I hold in my head. So like I could walk through the entire house right now in my head and see everything. But um yeah, I'm a very visual. So all of
uh,
my like any book that I write, any set piece in it like lives in my head and I could go back whenever I want.
Brilliant. Well, I don't know if it's brilliant. It's quite a creepy place to go
Yeah.
back to. Yeah. I mean, talking of the house though, how involved are you in the cover work, the artwork on the cover? Because that
So
went through a couple of changes. Was it? I can't remember if it was the tail. Was there a kind of the blood on the tail? Was that
yeah,
first, and then
yeah. So
you changed it? Is that right?
they wanted to dial up the horror a little bit because I think it looked a little too cute and they were
Right.
worried that people would pick it up and be like, "Oh, this is actually
No, it's a
scary."
shame.
Um, so usually I like um put like a PowerPoint together with some ideas and like um this is kind of my vision or this is what I think it would a direction that I think it could go. And then really it's the team at Berkeley and um they come back to me and they came back with this beautiful house and I love the colors too. I think it's very
Yeah.
the colors I think suit the tone of the book in terms of the like that juxtaposition of like aesthetics of kind of like put together and girly and then also like vicious and very the demon in the window.
Uh-huh. And the caps as well. Yeah, I've seen people walking around with those caps as well that you've created. No,
Yeah.
is there's like, did you do that? Was that the publisher that
I designed
sorted
those
that out?
hats. I gave
You
them
got
to
those.
the as thank yous to the people who blurbed the book.
That's brilliant. Yeah, yeah. So listen, just before I go, then obviously you're promoting this book now, which is coming out very soon. But I imagine, like all authors, you've got quite a few things on the go. I mean,
Yeah.
you said there that you need kind of the genre and the story to you need the stars to align. No, is there anything that's in alignment right now that you're working or trying to work on?
Yeah, so my next novel will be out next September. It's called Kiss, Larry, Play. It is a time loop horror. So I was thinking a lot about um, starting over in life, um, and like this weird space at the I'm in my mid 30s and kind of like all my friends are having babies and like
Right.
just
Yeah.
feeling kind of um, like what's the next phase of life in your late 30s. And so that kind of dovetailed with like, what if I wrote a time loop book and just thinking about time and my, mortality as I get older. And so confronting all of that in a time loop book, which is really fun. And so that'll be out next fall.
Brilliant. I can't wait for that. I don't know if you read Philip Fricassi's. I know you were with him the other day, I think at the StokerCon. Now, Philip Fricassi's The Third Rule
What's
of
it
Time
called?
Travel. It's fantastic book.
I haven't
Fantastic.
read that one yet, but
That's a
yeah, very
fantastic one. Yeah,
talented
you need to
guy.
read that.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's great. Well, listen, Rachel, I'm going to leave you. I don't want to keep you too much. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much
Thank
for a great
you.
book. And I hope to speak to you again sometime soon or meet you at a StokerCon or someplace
Yeah, for
similar.
sure.
All
All
right. Well,
right.
thank you
Thank
so
you
much for
so
your time.
much.
Take care of yourself. Thank you again.
Yeah.
Cheers
Bye.
then. Nice to speak.